What is up, everyone? Piscean here. Let's talk about Taurus with the help of the AI agent Claude Anthropic with peace and love. Shout out to Claude. And please like, subscribe, comment, share if you dare, and care with peace and love. Keep me in the algorithm. Comment, keep me in the algorithm so I can continue teaching astrology for free here on YouTube and sharing my story as well. So, Taurus. What is Taurus? Well, first of all, it's the bull, it's fixed earth, it's ruled by Venus, and if you were born specifically from April 20th through May 20th, you have sun in Taurus. Okay? So, first, this is not a personality quiz, it is a structural reading of Taurus. Built from 4 layers that are usually kept separate, being classical dignity theory, the decan and triplicity systems of Hellenistic astrology, 20th century psychological reframing, and a systems level view of the zodiac as 12 stages of one developmental cycle. Where the layers agree, the agreement is worth trusting. Where they diverge, the divergence is more useful than either position taken alone. Astrology is treated throughout as a symbolic language for pattern and reflection, not as a predictive science. Okay? Let's talk about core architecture for Taurus, its attributes and values. Okay, so we see element, modality, polarity, and ruling planet. So element, of course, is Earth, fixed, modality, yin, receptive, classically feminine polarity, and the ruling planet is Venus. We also see a little bit more here. So triplicity, Earth, Venus by day, Moon by night, Ptolemaic. Okay, and natural house is the second, the opposite sign being Scorpio, symbol being the bull, season is mid-spring in the northern hemisphere and mid-autumn in the southern hemisphere. Dates of April 20th through May 20th shifts by about a day year to year. And body is the throat, neck, thyroid, vocal cords. Guess who has some serious concerns about her throat, thyroid, vocal cords, and neck? This person here with a Taurus rising and algal sitting on her ascendant because she got on testosterone at the age of 19. But, alas, every sign is a coordinate, not a category. So, it marks the intersection of one element and one modality. And no other sign shares that exact intersection. Taurus is the only fixed earth sign in the zodiac, the sole point where matter, which is earth, meets duration, fixed. That single architectural fact does more explanatory work than any list of traits. The appetite for pleasure, the resistance to sudden change, the loyalty, the reputation for stubbornness. All of it can be derived from that one coordinate, rather than memorized as a separate rule. All right, let's look into this right here. This is the 12 signs as a 4x3 grid of element and modality. And Taurus occupies the only cell where Earth meets fixed. Your cardinal, you're fixed and immutable. So we've got fire here, of course. Cardinal fire is Aries, fixed fire is Leo, immutable fire is Sagittarius. Our earth signs, we see cardinal is Capricorn. Fixed earth is Taurus, and mutable earth is Virgo. Air, cardinal is Libra. Fixed Aquarius, and mutable is Gemini. And water signs, cardinal Cancer, fixed Scorpio, and mutable is Pisces. So, continuing onwards to the Venusian root, Taurus against Libra. This is very interesting and piques my interest, specifically because I have Taurus rising with the Libra moon. We know that Venus rules 2 signs, okay? And the difference between them is a case study and how one planetary principle changes meaning depending on the element that carries it. In Libra, an air sign, Venus organizes relationship. It seeks proportion, fairness, and the aesthetic pleasure of things placed in right relation to one another. And that reminds me, you know Tom York from Radiohead? Yeah, Sun in Libra, Sun in the 7th house. What did he write about? Everything in its right place. Everything in its right place. Balance. Okay? In Taurus, which is an earth sign, of course, Venus organizes matter. It seeks sensation, texture, and the aesthetic pleasure of things experienced directly in the body. Libra's Venus asks whether something looks right together, while Taurus's Venus asks whether it feels good to touch, taste, or hold. And that's why Taurus is food and drink. Both are Venus. Neither is the more authentic version. But treating Taurus as simply more Venusian or assuming Taurus and Libra experience beauty the same way misses the actual architecture. Taurus's aesthetic sense is not primarily visual or social. It is somatic. Its judgments run through the nervous system before they reach the mind. Right, fixed Earth. A structural reading. So modality describes what a sign does with the energy of its element, not merely what its element is. Cardinal signs initiate. They convert impulse into direction, while mutable signs distribute. They convert one state into the next. And that fixed signs concentrate. They take a direction that already exists and hold it long enough for it to become substantial. Applied to Earth, the element of form, matter, and consequence, fixity produces something specific. Not stillness for its own sake, but the sustained pressure required to turn potential into structure. The cardinal Earth sign Capricorn builds toward an aim, while a mutable Earth sign Virgo refines a process already underway. A fixed Earth sign holds a form steady until it is real enough to survive contact with the world. This is closer to a description of physics than of personality. Fixed Earth is a shape that outlasts the force that made it. All right, so Taurus's resistance to change is usually read as fear. The more accurate description is threshold. Fixed signs do not refuse motion. They require the case for motion to be strong enough to justify abandoning something already built. It fails when it fails by holding on a beat too long, not by refusing to begin. And this is where Taurus gets pretty upset. Like I said, I have Taurus rising, and I deleted a lot of videos, or I unlisted a lot of videos from the channel, over 300, just a few days ago. And I feel like, why did I even waste my time? Like, I'm not getting views, I'm not getting any support, but this is all bullshit. This is all fake. You know, of course I'm getting support. I have subscribers. I do get comments on videos. Thank you to you guys that are still here. So let's talk about the moon's exaltation in Taurus. So, as we mentioned, Taurus is ruled by Venus, but it is the moon that reaches its exaltation there. Its point of maximum comfort and effectiveness. This is not a redundancy. It is the layering of two distinct signatures for the same underlying need, which is felt safety. And what we see with Moon and Taurus, and I was with someone that had Moon and Taurus, very, very spoiled. Mom and Dad taking them on trips back and forth, and they were in a really big house in the suburbs. Knew a lot of people in power. So Venus's contribution is sensory. Safety established through pleasure, beauty, and the reliable presence of good things. The moon's contribution is emotional. Safety established through consistency, nourishment, and the felt sense of being held. Most signs carry one dominant signature for security. Taurus is unusual in carrying two, from two different planets, pointed at the same target. That is the more precise explanation for why Taurus's need for stability reads as unusually deep rather than merely preferential. It is not one planetary vote for comfort, but two, arriving by different routes and reinforcing each other. It also resolves a paradox observers often know. Taurus can be both deeply sensual and deeply nurturing, categories that do not obviously belong together. They belong together here because they are the Venus signature and the Moon signature, expressed through the same fixed Earth architecture. All right. Onto dignities: domicile, exaltation, detriment, and fall. So in its domicile, Venus, which governs Taurus by both classical and modern reckoning. The sign is Venus's home territory where its priorities set the tone by default. It's exalted in position of the Moon, which operates at its most effective and comfortable here. So we will go over the layered symbolism this produces. Oh wait, I already did. Detriment: Mars, traditional; Pluto, modern co-ruler of Scorpio. Okay, so a planet is in detriment in the sign opposite its own rulership. So Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, is structurally out of step with Taurus' slow, accumulative approach. Mars wants immediate action, while Taurus wants sufficient preparation. And in its fall, there's none assigned in classical dignity theory. Fall belongs to whichever planet is exalted in the opposite sign. No planet holds classical exaltation in Scorpio, so Taurus, unlike most signs, carries no fall placement. No structurally weakened planetary gas. Dignity theory describes how comfortably a planet's own nature fits a given sign's terrain, not whether the sign itself is fortunate or unfortunate. All right, the 3 decans. First, 0 through 10 degrees, sub-ruler Venus. Taurus in its purest form, sensory, aesthetic, appetite-driven, and unhurried. Second decan, 10 through 20 degrees, Mercury. Practical Taurus, with discernment, craft, usefulness, the hands put to skilled work. And third, 20 through 30 degrees, Saturn, structural Taurus, with endurance, discipline, long-term stewardship of resources. So this is a triplicity-based decan system, which assigns each third of a sign the character of the next sign sharing its element. Hellenistic astrologers also use a Saprocheltian decan system, an unbroken 36-step planetary sequence beginning at Aries, which assigns Taurus's 3 decans to Mercury, the Moon, and Saturn in turn. The two systems disagree on the first 2 decans and agree by coincidence on the third. Let's get into the second house resonance. So Taurus is the natural ruler of the second house, the sector of the chart concerned with movable resources, personal value, and the body as an own thing. This is often summarized as money and possessions, which is accurate but incomplete. The second house is where a person establishes what they are worth independent of what anyone else says about them. That produces a useful distinction. Net worth is what you have. Self-worth is the belief that determines what you are willing to keep, spend, or risk. Taurus's reputation for materialism is usually a misreading of a deeper second house project, grounding one's sense of value in something that does not depend on being witnessed, praised, or ranked. A Taurus placement that hoards is a second house project, stalled at the accumulation stage. A Taurus placement that has matured has simply stopped needing to prove the point. Right, the fixed cross. So we see the 4 fixed signs, being Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, sit 90 degrees apart and share a single job description, executed in 4 different materials. Hold a thing still long enough for it to matter. Cardinal signs get credit for starting things, immutable signs for adapting them, but nothing lasts long enough to be useful without a fixed sign holding the line. Taurus is the fixed sign assigned to matter itself, to the body, to resources, to whatever can be touched. Its stubbornness, examined this way, is not a personality flaw, distributed unevenly among Taurus placements. It is a literal job of the position, to be the place in the chart that does not move first, because that is Aries' job. Alright, so Taurus earth element, resource, and the body is getting stabilized. Leo, fire, identity and will. Right. Scorpio, water, depth and psychic material. And Aquarius, air, idea and collective structure. Let's talk about the relational geometry here for Taurus. Or just in general, I want to give a quick rundown of this. So, aspect geometry describes structural relationship, not a compatibility score. So, a square, for example, is not a warning, and a trine is not a guarantee. What it reliably describes is the kind of work two signs do together, Taurus and Scorpio. Its opposite are frequently cast as astrology's central power struggle, but the more precise reading is that they hold two halves of one axis. The value of what exists, Taurus, against the necessity of transformation, Scorpio. Whether that produces conflict or completion depends on the rest of both charts. Sign alone never determines a relationship. Okay? So we have our aspect, angles, signs, and dynamic. So semi-sextile, 30 degrees, Aries, Gemini. Adjacent, minor friction requires deliberate bridging. Sextile, 60 degrees, Cancer, Pisces. Different element. It's easy cooperative flow and mutual support. Square, 90 degrees. Leo, Aquarius. Same modality, direct friction, growth through tension. Trine, 120 degrees, Virgo, Capricorn. Same element, natural ease, risk of shared stagnation. Quincunx, 150 degrees, Libra, Sagittarius. No shared element or modality. Requires ongoing translation. Opposition, 180 degrees, Scorpio. The polarity axis, Taurus's built-in mirror and completion point. Alrighty. Onto body and historical medical astrology. So medical astrology, tradition dating to Hellenistic and medieval practice, assigns each sign a zone of the body, moving head to toe from Aries to Pisces. Taurus governs the throat, the neck, thyroid, vocal cords, and in most versions of the system, the ears, which is really funny because growing up, my mom burnt my ear. I almost didn't have an ear because she was trying to flat iron my hair or use a golden hot comb or something that burnt my ear. My ear was crusted for a little bit. It was in elementary school. So I found that very interesting. Historically, this correspondence was used to time treatments and explain illness. Contemporary astrology retains it mainly as a symbolic mapping rather than a diagnostic one. The symbolism holds up reasonably well, even stripped of its medical claims. The throat is the body's threshold between the interior, what is felt, wanted, held, and the exterior, what is spoken, expressed, released. That is a fitting zone for a sign whose core tension is between holding and releasing. It is worth knowing for its symbolic coherence, not as health guidance. Right, shadow work. Every sign's gift and its distortion are made of the same material, under different amounts of pressure. Taurus's gifts, patience, sensory presence, loyalty, the capacity to build something durable. Because these gifts become their own shadow under two conditions. When holding on continues past the point of usefulness, and when comfort is used to avoid rather than to restore. 3 patterns are worth naming directly. First is possessiveness, security seeking applied to people rather than resources. The attempt to hold a relationship still the way one might hold a plot of land. Inertia, the fixed earth virtue of steadiness running with no off switch, mistaking the absence of change for the presence of safety. And sensory avoidance, just overeating, overbuying, numbing through comfort, is the same appetite that makes Taurus generally gifted with pleasure redirected away from feeling difficult things and toward feeling only pleasant ones, whether it be temporarily or not, which it usually is for the most part. So the growth edge sits appropriately at the opposite end of the axis. Scorpio's lesson that some things have to end, decay, or transform before something truer can take their place. Taurus does not need to become Scorpio. It needs to borrow occasionally, while Scorpio's willingness to let form die on purpose. All right, now I want to get into the developmental arc, and then we'll finish off with the integration practice. So, early sensory accumulation. We see Taurus energy learns through the senses before it learns through language, whether it's taste, texture, temperature, touch. At this stage, the task is simple accumulation, building a reliable store of what feels good and what can be counted on. Establishing deliberate building, the accumulation becomes deliberate. Career, home, and possessions are assembled, not for show, but as proof, primarily to the self, that stability is achievable through one's own effort. This is often the most productive stage of a Taurus placement's life, and the one most associated with the sign's reputation for material focus. Reckoning the Scorpio axis crises. The accumulated structure meets its first real test, usually a change it did not choose, a loss, a relocation, an ending. This is the discovery that everything held on to can still be taken, and that identity, built entirely on possession, is exactly as fragile as possession itself. All right, let's finish up here. One more, mastery. Restful ground. So what survives the reckoning is a different kind of groundedness, not the accumulation of more, but the trust that comes from having already lost something and remained intact. Mature Taurus energy needs less, not more, and steadiness stops being defensive. It becomes finally restful, available to others as an actual resource rather than a fortress. And integration practice. 4 prompts for working with this pattern directly in writing. So first, name one thing you are holding on to, primarily because releasing it would be uncomfortable, not because it still serves you. Where in your life is comfort functioning as nourishment, and where has it quietly become avoidance? What do you currently treat as proof of your worth that has nothing to do with what you actually value? What form in your life is ready to end, not from crises, but because you can feel, honestly, that it has already completed its purpose? None of this is prescriptive. Taurus is not a set of instructions. It is a lens, one way of describing the specific recognizable difficulty and gift of being asked to hold something steady in a world that keeps moving. Used well, that lens explains rather than excuses. It is worth returning to when the pattern shows up and worth setting down the rest of the time. Thank you for watching this video with peace and love. Piscean out.